Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 1059 of the Juicebox Podcast. It took me 4 times to record that correctly. Erica Forsyth is back today as we continue on our parenting series. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. Also, while you're listening, remember that if you live in California or a number of other states, Erica Forsyth is available to be your therapist. Check her out at ericaforsyth.com. Speaking of .coms, CozyEarth.com. Use the offer code JUICEBOX at checkout. Save 40% off of your sheets, your towels, and your beautiful, comfortable clothing. And AG1. DrinkAG1.com/JuiceBox. Get 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D with your first purchase at my link. Check out the Defining Diabetes Bold Beginnings Pro Tip Series, Type 2 Pro Tip Series. All kinds of great content from the Juicebox Podcast about your diabetes is available. If you would like to see lists of them, go to juiceboxpodcast.com, go up to the top to the menu, it'll take you all through it. Or if you're in the private Facebook group, head over to the featured tab where you'll see lists of all the series. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter. Absolutely fantastic, incredibly accurate, wonderful second chance test strips. What am I talking about? The Contour NextGen. ContourNext.com/juicebox. But if you haven't heard the remastered pro tip series that goes from episode 1000 to 1026, there are special Contour NextGen ads just in the pro tip series. And I'm just going to tell you, go over to the pro tip series, check out those ads for the Contour NextGen, because there's a special link in there. If you're a U.S. resident, and this is while supplies last, so do not dilly-dally. Absolutely free meter. Just go to the website, fill out the thing, boom, here comes the meter. Today's podcast is also sponsored by BetterHelp. You will save 10% off your first month of therapy at my link, betterhelp.com/juicebox. Welcome back. We're doing episode 2 today of our parenting series that does not have a title yet. So
yeah, it might just be the parenting series.
We should call it the parenting series without a title. But last week for episode 1, we talked about different parenting styles. So if you want to go back to that episode, tell me what they are again.
Authoritarian, authoritative, uninvolved / neglectful, and permissive.
And we did a nice conversation that discussed the 4 of those, reasons why they might be sometimes negative or positive, or how to kind of see it in yourself if you're doing it. And today we're going to do, I like this one, building positive communication.
Yes.
This is great. I'm going to tell you, I think that most of the problems I've experienced in my life with other people are in some way, shape, or form based on a miscommunication. So
yes,
it can't be stressed enough how important this is. When people come into you, do they always come singularly or do they come as family sometimes?
Actually, both. I will have often one caregiver reach out with the intent of me supporting their child or teen. Often it's really beneficial to weave in some sessions with the parent and the child. Mm-hmm. I think it would be amazing to have more, parent or whole family sessions would be wonderful. That is logistically challenging a lot of the time. Yes.
So when you get them in a room together, do you sort of sit back and watch the dynamic, or do you ask questions? Is it a mix of that? Like, how do you get to the part where you can make an assessment about what's happening?
Yes. Oftentimes, if I have a parent and a child in the room, often I have heard from both of them individually of quote, what is the problem? Mm-hmm. And then it's really beneficial for me to see the dynamic play out. Where, is one person cutting off the other? Is one person misunderstanding the other? are they really aligned and validating each other and practicing reflective listening? We'll get into some of these terms. So yes, I often like to see and observe their communication and their dynamic play out so that I can help intervene.
Do people assess the other person's intention well normally, or is that the basis of a bad communication? Like, you just don't understand, maybe our speech styles are different, or one person is like very black and white minded and the other person speaks in allegory or something like that. Like, is there confusion there, like with how people talk? Like, I guess my question is, do you find that mostly people's intentions are good?
Yes. Yes. I think, well, they're in the room.
Yeah,
so
sure.
they're seeking help. They have some awareness that there's a problem, right? So there's already that they're leaning into, hey, we want to address something, or maybe sometimes we're not quite sure what the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes maybe it's an assumption of, assuming what is wrong, or assuming how we're miscommunicating. There's assumptions that are interfering with the appropriate communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's kind of how you think of it, is it's assumptions. Like, I hear one thing, but my assumption is you mean this, or you said it because of this, even though you're not telling me. So it is kind of a human thing to expect that the person you're communicating with has some sort of an ulterior motive that you're not aware of. Is that right?
Yes. And you just practiced some really good reflective listening in terms of, I said something and you said, now I hear you saying assumptions. That's really good. So is there ulterior motive?
Well, not if there is, but do people assume there is? Like, do people just assume that they're not being told the whole truth, that something's being held back? And does that cause a little bit of the problem? Because I think the personality that just believes everybody, they're not going to be upset by anything you say, because they're just going to take you on face value and move on. But if I'm the person who's like, well, what do they really mean by that? Or what are they trying to accomplish? If I'm always trying to work out what the other person's up to, then I could be putting on them thoughts and ideas that they don't have. And I don't know, it seems to me like it shouldn't be that hard to say what you mean, for someone to hear it, and for you to absorb it. But it's one of the most difficult things on the planet. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't even know what my question is. Like, really, like,
yes.
Just like what people are going to get. Everyone listening has a misunderstanding going on with someone right now. And they genuinely probably believe that they're on the right side of that disagreement. But both people think they're on the right side of that disagreement. So either you don't want to hear the other person, or you're not interested in the other person, or you steadfastly believe that you're coming from a good place. So that must mean they're not coming from a good place. That's the assumption, I think, that's it. Took me a minute to get to it.
That I'm right and you're wrong.
Yeah.
That either my belief is right, or my position on this point is right and you're wrong. Mm-hmm. And so that's where people get into they're frozen, right? They can't move past whatever the argument is. If one person is believing they're right and the other person's wrong, then guarantee that the other person is believing the same thing. Right? So then they're not going to budge.
And what's the extension of that? If I'm right, you must be willfully ignoring me, or not worth listening to, or whatever. Because I told someone this the other day. I hope that there's no personal details in this, but my daughter has been using a Contour meter for years. The Contour NextGen blood glucose meter is the latest in that line. ContourNext.com/juicebox. The Contour NextGen features remarkable accuracy and second chance test strips. That's right, second chance sampling can help you to avoid wasting strips. There's actually a study that says that people can waste up to 100 strips a year due to application errors. But you won't have that trouble, because the Contour NextGen strips, my goodness gracious, actually the Contour Next strips that work with all of their meters, feature second chance sampling. Means you can kind of like get a little blood, not be enough, and go back and get more without interrupting the accuracy of the test. Isn't that amazing? ContourNext.com/juicebox. Head over there now. click all through the website. There's a bunch of glucose monitors there, information about all kinds of stuff, test strips, and places online where you can buy your meters and your strips right now, where they may very well be cheaper in cash than you're paying through your insurance. ContourNext.com/juicebox. Fantastic meter, fantastic deal. I can't recommend it enough. I kind of moderated a problem online by having a private, quick conversation with a person. And that person comes in and to my, a DM with me and says, look, I'm an adult, but I have autism and I have trouble hearing tones sometimes. Mm-hmm. I'm kind of curt with people. I'm not trying to cause a problem here. And we chatted back and forth for a second. And at the end, I offered this advice. And I said, look, I don't know if this is applicable to you, but the way I moderate this place so efficiently, or in a way that people, generally speaking, are very happy with it, is I just assume everyone is right and wrong, but moreover, that it doesn't matter. Like that we're not trying to prove who's right and wrong.
Yes.
You're here for one reason. They're here for another reason. Sometimes your reasons are the same. Sometimes they're different. Anyway, this person's come here. They need something. Give it to them. Don't ask them why they need it. Don't equivocate. Don't tell them, oh, you know what you really should be concerned about, the thing that I care about. Just answer their question the best you can so they can move on with this information. And I mean, that's how I handle it. But the response back from this person was, I can't do that. I have a very strong feeling of right and wrong. And I was like, oh, I see. Super interesting. And I think only because this person maybe is on the spectrum were they even willing to tell me that. I think everyone feels that way.
Right.
I think that person was only willing to tell me because they're accustomed to explaining their situation when they get into those, the situation with those people. Anyway, I don't know.
And props to that person for having
terrific.
that awareness. Wouldn't it be great if we entered into a conversation saying, hey, I lean this way in a conversation. I can speak over you. I can be rude. I can be curt,
Oh, 100%. That's exactly what I was thinking. I actually said, tell them that. Just say that, because I think it fixes the whole problem. I mean, you still need the person on the other side to understand their shortcomings or whatever. Mm-hmm. But you've done this for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a thing, a central thought you have about why people have trouble communicating? If I asked you, boil it down to a thought.
I think people have trouble communicating because they are two things. I don't know if I could do one reason. Two things. They are either not listening or they are misunderstanding what the person is trying to communicate. Mm-hmm. Or the person's not communicating clearly. So three things.
Right.
Right. So there's the, as we've talked about before, there's the sender and the receiver. And if the sender isn't being clear and there's interference, the receiver's not going to hear the message correctly. If the receiver is thinking about what they're going to do tonight, or they're irritated about the thing that just happened 10 minutes before, even if the sender is communicating clearly, the receiver is not going to hear it accurately. So the sender and the receiver have their own stuff going on. And then there's the delivery. And they all have to be in alignment for the message to be delivered and received correctly.
But if we can't get them in alignment, what do I do on my side to make it okay? I can tell you what I do. I don't know if it's right or not. I have this basic feeling that when I'm dealing with somebody, so there's two different types of people, that I'm either dealing with a person who I have knowledge of, or I'm dealing with a person I don't have knowledge of. When I deal with a person I have knowledge of, it is always my assumption that they are coming from a good place. So even if I don't understand what they're saying, or even if it doesn't make sense, I never jump to, what the hell's wrong with you? I always stay with, I must just not be understanding this correctly, or they must not be saying it correctly. But overall, I've been with this person for 20 years, 15 years. I've known this person for 30 years. I know their intentions are good. I just assume their intentions are good. And then with just that one act, it all goes away. Mm-hmm. And when I'm dealing with a stranger who I can't make the assumption that they're good, I just give them the benefit of the doubt. And by giving them the benefit of the doubt, it releases me from having to judge them. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, and releases you from heartache or defensiveness or attacking or reacting, right? You are responding when you are entering into a conversation from that grounded place of they're doing the best they can,
Right.
or they have good intentions, or they, are trying to communicate something. You are not going to automatically react.
Yeah.
In an inappropriate way.
My best example would be you could live next door to somebody forever, be lovely people, have nothing but good experiences with them, been there for 3.5 years, great people, etc. Then all of a sudden, an election comes up and they throw a sign in their front yard and it disagrees with your idea. And you think, what's wrong with them? If you just continue to think they've got thoughts and ideas that are different than mine, they're still the same people that were before, because we all say that all the time, right? Like, what's the thing you hear in like the political realm all the time? Like the assumption is most people are well-meaning and probably fairly centric with their thinking. Like most people are probably not real far one way or the other, and that we all sort of have the same concerns, freedom, liberty, food, shelter, healthcare, that kind of stuff. But as soon as we get down deep and we're looking for something to argue about, it's super easy to go, well, there's a difference. I'll focus on that difference, taking it out of politics and bringing it back into a personal conversation. The minute it's wrong, the minute you feel like something they said is wrong, it's like an attack point. And now can you hear that thunder?
Yes.
This could be the last podcast episode ever. When you're in the middle of that, I think that people defend their feelings, and I think people get confused with their ideas and who they are. I think they commingle their ideas with who they are. I don't know if that makes sense or not. And then that human thing comes in. I want to win. I want to be right. I want to be on the right side of this. Like blah, blah. Even when it's you looking across at somebody you've been married to for 20 years, for some reason, you're trying to beat them in this conversation. It's ridiculous. Or your kids who you would 10 minutes ago have maybe jumped in front of a car to help. Now you're in the middle of their bedroom saying something absolutely ridiculous to them because you don't want to be whatever, like wrong, or I don't know. I don't know. You got to let it go. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and it's the ability to either let it go or enter into the conversation from a really stable posture is dependent on all the other things that happened to you that night, that morning, at work, with whoever you interacted with, your past trauma.
Yeah.
Right. So all of that is at play at every touch point that we have when we communicate with our partners, our friends, our coworkers. And it's hard. It's hard to constantly be in tune with how we're feeling as we communicate. But the first step is, yes, just having that awareness of where am I? Where am I today as I enter into this conversation without attacking, responding?
It's interesting how quickly someone can get lit up and let go of all that stuff. Like this is just verbal, obviously, but you can even see how that path leads to like abusive behavior too. Like, how do you let go in that moment of that's the person, like that's my person right there. And now suddenly everything you're doing is acting like they're a non-consequential punching bag. And it's really, really something. So we know this is important, right? To have healthy communication, know how to resolve conflict, but that's not easy either, right? We don't get taught how to resolve conflict at all.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think we enter into a conflictual conversation based on the things that we just talked about, right? Like the misunderstanding based where are we at in our own mood level. And prior to even getting to talking about the conflict resolution, one of the easiest ways to make sure we're understanding one another is to reflect back. And it's super simple at its core, and it can feel really silly sometimes. It's something they teach in all grad schools for psychology therapy, the reflective listening. So you say, I want to eat an orange today. And then you would respond back, I hear that you want to eat an orange today. You're starting very simple to then bring it into when you're communicating with really complex thoughts and feelings. The person that is the receiver can respond by, so this is what I hear you say. Am I hearing you correctly? And you can do it written, you can do reflective, written response. You can also do it verbally. It's hard to do on a constant basis, but when you start to feel yourself, those emotions rising, your heart is racing, you want to attack and respond. And I know that feeling, right? When you just want to prove your point. Okay, wait, let's say, okay, wait, let's take a minute. Is this what I hear you say? Is that correct? And that can prevent so much conflict, but it is hard to do consistently.
Yeah.
It really is.
From your personal perspective, why is it difficult for you when it is?
Because you have to be checking in with your own body, your regulation. Are you feeling dysregulated? When you're in a heated argument, whether it's with, parent, child, or partner to partner, and you're wanting to prove your point, you're tired, you're stressed, maybe you're hungry, maybe you have low or high blood sugar, you're just kind of done. Maybe it's a conversation you've had over and over again, whether it's about whatever it is. It's really hard to step back and say, okay, this is what I hear you say. And then the person might say, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And you still might disagree with that. So then once you clarify, okay, I'm understanding the message, then we move into, okay, how are we going to solve this problem or this conflict? But before doing that, you really want to get clear of what it is that we are having this, what are we arguing about?
Mm-hmm. I will share something personal with you. So if I'm having a disagreement with my wife, I should say when, not if. It definitely happens. When I'm having a disagreement or she and I are disagreeing about something, if the situation is that I'm saying something that she's misunderstanding, I don't care that she misunderstands me, but I literally get hurt if her misunderstanding highlights that she thinks I would do a thing I wouldn't do. I don't know how to put that in better words, but if what she's saying makes me feel like she thinks poorly of me, I find it very upsetting. And then it becomes incredibly important for me to explain myself because I don't want her to think I would do something like that. And then after that hurt part goes, I'm angry that after giving 30 years of my life to our union, she would think that of me. That's maybe one of the hardest things for me to deal with in a personal relationship. Now, if I'm being a bad person, I just go, I put my head down. Right? But like, if I've just said something and you've misunderstood it, my first thought is what I said. The second part, though, is really the part that, I don't know, it lights me up inside. Like, I guess in a simple way, how could you think I would think that or do that?
Right.
It's up. Don't you know me better than that after all this time? It's hard on me.
She's probably, she came at it in that conversation. Maybe she's had a hard day and is not thinking clearly and slowly and is making these quick assumptions. But even though she knows who you are at your core, but this is really common too, right? Like, because you know that your partner is honest and hardworking, but maybe in a moment you make a comment saying, "Oh, you're lazy." And then the partner thinks, no, one of my core values is that I work really hard. But maybe the partner who accused the other one of being lazy is feeling tired themselves or is irritable because of they got into a traffic
So you're being kind. I think sometimes she's just trying to burn my ass and she picks the thing she knows is going to get to me the worst. I think she's like, this argument's going nowhere. Let's just piss him off instead.
Well, that happens in relationships too.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a conscious decision. I don't think someone sits there and thinks, this has been going on too long. Why don't I make him crazy? When you get into a conflict and you have to, like you said, it's going to be hard to stop. But, I mean, we're talking about parenting specifically. I want to start by helping, by sharing something that a 22-year-old just told me recently in an interview. This guy was talking about how growing up, whole time, he thinks he started smoking weed when he was a sophomore in high school. And his father wrote him about it and wrote him. And then once he was of legal age, he realized his dad smoked weed too. And they were now not doing it together specifically, but he's like, now it became clear. And he said that the hypocrisy stuck with him. You could tell that's where he got caught. Like, how could you have been giving me so much trouble about something for so long, about a thing you do? So I don't care. Weed doesn't matter. It's not the conversation. It's hypocrisy. Kids smell that a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's damaging when you're hypocritical with your kids. But it's hard not to do.
It is so challenging, because if we think about, yes, you're right. Like, we decide, could it be like cursing or
something smaller?
yeah, something smaller. I mean, even like, let's say brushing your teeth, or I'm trying to think of like a behavior, but it also can be something that you communicate, and you're trying to raise your child up to have these, good habits. And then they learn. I'm practicing some reflective listening here to make sure I understand, and to say, the child realizes, wow, this whole time you were training and teaching and parenting me to not do this thing. I realized you're doing it. I think in that moment, it would be amazing if that child now, adult child, could go back to the parent to have some conversations around that of like, Dad, what was this? What is this about? But there is a lot of pain and violation of trust in that space.
And I think the only way to stop that is you can't hide who you are, whether it's in a conversation or if it's physically or like an action. And I get you. Like, I'll use a bigger, more bombastic thing. Like, if you know the trouble of heroin addiction and you see your kid moving towards heroin, I get that you're going to be hypocritical, but there's a way to not be hypocritical still. You can still say, I see that you're going towards this thing. I've made that mistake. Here are the things that it's done to me. Not just say, don't do that, or don't be like me. Like that's too simplistic. Because that also, children don't, when you point something out about your kids that is a trait of yours, or a trait, here's where I've seen it the worst. Let's say you got a couple of kids and one of your kids has some of the mom's traits, some of the kids has some of the dad's traits. You should never say to the other one, oh my God, you're just like your father. Because what are you saying? You're saying you don't like my dad, or at least this part of him, and you don't like me. That's not what that's not what you think. And that is not what you're trying to communicate, but that is exactly what you're saying. So everything has to be explained. Things take more words than people want to use, I think. Is that a fair way of, like, you can't just blurt things out. You have to be complete. I feel this way. This thing worries me because I know I've done it already too, and I'm hoping to help you avoid this issue. Like, now you're not a hypocrite. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, the best parenting is through modeling what you want your child to emulate and replicate, right? Like, we put on our seatbelt and we model that for our children, and because we tell them to put their seatbelt on and we all want to be safe. And so applying that, the modeling, it's okay. We are not perfect people. We are not perfect parents. And we might make choices that we know are not healthy for us on a daily basis. When it's developmentally appropriate to include your child into that conversation, I think it's really a healthy mode of communication to say, hey, I struggle with this. I want to eat red vines all day, but we shouldn't because it's I don't know, that's a random candy thing. I was going to say chocolate because I love chocolate. Like, we want to, it's okay to say to their child, like, hey, I struggle with this too, whatever it is. And I'm trying to help correct this habit by this, and this, and let's do this together.
And I'm not saying I don't do it. Listen, in the funniest way I can tell you, I've turned to my daughter at times and gone, hey, look, I'm already married. If you want to break somebody's balls, go find your own guy. But I got a lady doing it for me already. I'm like, I don't need you to. I can't take this from two different fronts. but when either my wife or my daughter are being constructive and telling me something about myself, I don't feel that way. Right? Like, it's okay then. But I'm sorry, I got to loop back around to conflict management.
Yes.
But I mean, we kind of are and we're not at the same time. So you have to be aware, like with anything, that conflict can come at any time. And that's a thing I think we all just know. Like, you're going along having the greatest day, and all of a sudden you're like, how did we get here? What is happening? Like, I just tried to go in the kitchen to get a glass of water. Like, so you do need to be aware it could happen anytime. The list I'm looking at is from Canada. Canadians are lovely, so this must be right. Proactive. They're saying here, like think about preventing problems, not just how to resolve them. Like, how do you avoid them to begin with? And then a lot of stuff we've talked about already. Try to understand all sides of the situation. Initiate dialogue. This one I found very helpful when I was looking at it. Know when to ask for help. And I try to do that. If I get lost in a conversation, when you start arguing in circles and you almost don't remember what it is you're talking about anymore, like out there, I'll stop and I'll go, I'm sorry. I know this sounds wrong. I don't even know what we're talking about anymore. Like you get, like, please just give me a thing to answer right now. Cause I feel like I'm being shot at from 10 sides and I'm just babbling, trying to come up with something that's going to make you happy. And I don't want to just make you happy. I'd like to actually, assess what our options are here and do something about it.
Yes, I think that's kind of on a broader scale to kind of, when you're in that looping and that happens, you're arguing and then you're going on to the next point about whatever household duty, and you're just kind of snowballing into this big fight to say, hey, let's take a step back. Why did we start this? I felt this way about something and you felt this way, like kind of going back to the starting, like a reset in the reflective listening.
Yeah.
I think in that space of timing, maybe you guys have there's been conflict for so long, whether it's been that day or weeks or months, to say we need help or we need to reset. But then when you're having the conversation, when you are feeling either wronged or your partner is feeling wronged or your child, it's so helpful to set up the right time to say, okay, are you in a good spot to talk about this issue that we've been arguing about? And this works with your children, 5-year-olds, because we as parents, oftentimes we think, okay, there's a problem, we need to fix it. I know I am in that mentality often. And so just remember, our children, our partners, ourselves, we all need to have a fair chance to engage in it in a really healthy conversation. So to check in on the timing.
Took me a long time to figure that out. I know I've shared this with you in the past, but because I came from a divorced family, when there's conflict, I used to feel very pressured to resolve it immediately.
Yes.
And that's normally not okay. Sometimes people just need a little space before you can come back together. It's a great thought. So how do people, when kids are what they are, like, right? Like, I don't know if you all have younger kids or older kids, there's a moment they get to a certain age, they just disappear. They're like in their rooms, they become more private, and and that lasts for a number of years. But with all the different reasons why it's hard for an adult to talk to a child, what are some ways to make sure that those lines stay open? Is that? Yes.
So having an established, this is particularly challenging, right? As children become teens, they want their independence, autonomy, space, but to maintain the open lines of communication, they want it too, right? I think there's oftentimes, as parents, we can assume that they don't want to talk to us. They're going to just, fight back but I think what I hear a lot from teens is they still want, with an appropriate level of checking in or a validation. It's like, wow, I see you, I'm thinking specifically around the diabetes piece. Like, I see, wow, this looks like it must've been a really hard day. How are you feeling? Whether you're looking at your blood sugars or not, just how looks like it was a really great day. How are you feeling? Or just having those moments, I think also can be brief, as to maintain that open line of communication. They don't have to be as long, but having these small checkpoints, having routines, if they are open to it, and establishing when are you going to have those check-in conversations? Is it via text? Is it at dinner? Is it nighttime? Is it in the morning? Is whatever it is. But I think engaging your child and inviting them into the conversation of like, hey, what do you want our relationship to look like? Without assuming they want it one way or the other, or you're putting your assumptions on them.
can also convey a lot with those actions. It doesn't have to be these long conversations. Just asking somebody. My son was not feeling well the other day, and a couple hours after he told me that, I sent him a note. I said, I'm just checking on you. That's all. And he said, I'm doing good. I was like, okay. I don't know if he's really doing good or not. But the point is that he knew that he didn't feel well. He shared that with me. I remembered it, and it meant enough to me to ask him about it later. I think that's the important part. Like, people could get stuck on the important part is that he feels better. I'm like, yeah, okay. But he's 23. He's going to feel better. Or he's going to go to the hospital. I'm not in control of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But the rest of it, I am in control with. Like, you're doing great. Or at the end of the day, last night, Arden has been commuting back to college, and she's got broken up into a couple days. She drove 300 miles yesterday. It's the first time she's ever gone that far on her own. And at the end of the night, I just said, hey, you did great. And wow, your blood sugars were terrific. I don't know what you did, but that was great. Now, here's the thing. Maybe she didn't do anything. Right? Like the algorithm's just running and it just worked great. And she might be like, I never looked at that. But she still gets to leave that momentary interaction with, hey, I've done a thing. I accomplished it. And it sounds like I did a good job. Cool. Roll on. You know what I mean? And those are the little things that end up in. My son had an issue a couple of weeks ago, and he called us. He was having a conflict of his own, a personal conflict of his own, and he called us to tell us about it. And we talked about it for a little bit. We listened to him. We offered some thoughts, didn't push him off of the way he felt. I'm like, just like, this is our perspective of this. And we got off the phone, and I said to my wife, how great is that? And she goes, what? Like he's having a problem with it. I'm like, no. I'm like, how great is it? He called us. Like, yes. That's the great part. Like, the rest of it's all bullshit. Like that's what happened, right? He'll have a conflict. It'll come back. It'll fix, whatever. Who cares? We're not going to fix it for him. He thought to call us. I was like, you're not paying attention.
That's a win.
Yeah, we won.
Yeah. Well, it's a win. It's a win in your relationship, right? That to have that established trust and safety. Like, he felt safe in reaching out to you guys.
And that's my point about when I hear about keeping lines of communication open. I think people hear those things and think you're going to rattle off these 10 bullet points. And if they just do these things, then they're going to have open lines of communication. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's about creating, somebody just used this phrase with me. Damn it, I'm going to forget it. A psychologically safe space or something like that. Like a place where when your brain says, I need help, it goes to you. And that's the communication. They don't even have to be words. You could sit and put your arm around somebody. That's still communicating. Anyway, okay. So
yes. It's about the relationship, and it's hard to maintain that given all of the factors of life. But creating that space of trust and dependency in a really healthy, developmentally appropriate way, it takes time and effort, and it's hard to do all the time.
So the next thing here on our list that I think is really important that is apologizing, like as a parent especially, I mean, but in general, but it's, for me, it's when I learned how to apologize to my kids or to somebody else, to me, it's about like ego. It's about letting go of like that, whatever the hell that is, that doesn't want you to be wrong, So, I mean, my wife forced me to do it. She's like, you have to go apologize to her now. I'm like, oh, God damn it. Okay. And but in your head, I used to say like, but no, I did the right thing. Like, this was important. We can't care that she doesn't like it. And my wife's like, no, we can't care that she doesn't like it, but we don't have to fight with her about it. Like, and this went the wrong way. You have to go apologize to her. So I learned how to do that. It's very uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable. Yeah. And it's also a piece of repair, right? You're repairing the relationship. And maybe you did, whether it's you said or did something that made the child feel uncomfortable, or you truly did make, if you made a mistake in how you communicated it, not only are you repairing the relationship by apologizing, you're again going back to the modeling piece of like, hey, I'm not perfect, and I'm going to model to my child that it's okay to go ask, to say I'm sorry or ask for forgiveness. Right. Like, what a beautiful gift you can give your child in that space. It's kind of really addressing two really key issues
Mm-hmm.
in that space. I think that's great.
It's so hard in the beginning, especially if you don't feel like you did anything wrong. And so then that means you haven't stepped back far enough to reflect on the situation and see what you've done. So now you have to see that. Sometimes you're seeing it while you're saying it and you're apologizing and you're like and it's just, I didn't grow up that way. Like the way I grew up was I told you to do it. That's that. And there is part of you that goes, well, I'm alive and I'm successful and I'm like, maybe that works. Like maybe I'm supposed to not care. And I want to point out, I don't think you should be simping around apologizing to your kids constantly, right? Like, oh, I bumped into you in the kitchen. I'm so sorry. Like that kind of stuff. I just mean when you do something wrong, when you hurt someone's feelings or a thing didn't go the way you meant for it to, or even sometimes when something's happening to them that's got nothing to do with you, you can go in and say, I am so sorry this is happening to you, but, and go from there. I'm not in control of this, but still, and here are the things I am in control of that I did wrong. I shouldn't have done those things. I'm going to try better next time. I might not get it right next time. Please call me out on it again if I do it again. Eventually that gets easy. It's just the first couple times you feel like an idiot. Like I sort of,
yes.
yeah. So, and that's your ego, right? That makes you feel that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ego and maybe flirting with the mentality of, as you were sharing growing up you grew up in a very probably authoritarian type of parenting style because I said so.
Right.
Because I said so. And and no means no. And all those things.
Yeah.
And I think one of the most common opportunities where we can exercise, asking for, saying I'm sorry is when we start to yell. Because the kid starts to yell, your teen starts to yell, and then you get heightened. And so you yell back as the parent, and then you're both yelling, and then you find yourself yelling with your 8-year-old, and you're like, what is happening? And
Erica, you don't know what life's all about till you've told a 9-year-old to go fuck themselves.
Oh, gosh.
That's when you know you're in the shit.
You need to go put yourself in a timeout for sure. And I mean, and parents do that. And I think that's a great, if you do find like you are just beyond, you are at max capacity in terms of all you can handle and you're yelling, you can say, what, mommy needs to go put herself in a timeout and like do your breathing and do all the things you need to do. And then you go back and say, what, you still can't go to this thing or whatever that you're arguing about. Like I still believe that you can't do this thing or have this thing, but I'm sorry that I yelled. Mm-hmm. Like the delivery.
I think the go finding space for yourself is important because, your kids don't know that you're really just 10 years removed from being like, I don't know, a girl in a parking lot of a Burger King making out with boys and smoking weed. and now all of a sudden they're looking at you looking for answers and you're like, I am like barely on top of this.
Yes.
Sometimes you want to look at your kids and be like, you have no idea how amazed I am this house is warm, okay? So you're asking a lot here. But we don't have time. Like, you don't have time. Like, every day that you don't communicate well with a child, it's not a day lost. It's much more than that lost. You don't realize it while it's happening. That's why that joke is like, oh, they'll talk about it in therapy. Like, I'm just going to keep messing up day after day. But you don't have to keep messing up day after day. Like, you could mitigate it a little bit. You're not going to be perfect, but again, mitigation would be nice. Like, what if we cleaved off 30% of your stupidity as a parent? Like, and that sort of stuff is, joking aside, but pulling that thought together. I do think that's sort of what happens sometimes is that people really aren't, it's the best not kept secret of people who are older. Like, I'm not that much smarter than I was 30 years ago. I really, the only thing grounding me is the responsibility I feel for my loved ones. Like, if those kids and that lady downstairs didn't exist, I'd be a shit show. Like I just, and if I had like an income, oh my God, what a disaster I'd be. Right. Like, so that's still like, I didn't go to some class to be an adult. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just doing the best I can. I think sometimes people can't quell that side of themselves. So when they're dealing with their kids, they just like turn a key and shut it off and turn into like whatever version they think a parent's supposed to look like. And
Yes.
that can be a mistake. That's my opinion, but there's a way to be you and parent. Like, you guys know me pretty well. I'm a moron, but my kids are pretty well adjusted. So, like I found a way to be myself, and at the same time, in appropriate situations, do the things that the person in charge is supposed to be doing without hopefully making them, never want to talk to me again, which so far so good.
Yes. Yes. It's hard to do that as you're talking about, like, yourself, you are so much more than a parent, but that is a big role, right? Mm-hmm. And layering on top of that, again, thinking about the diabetes management, I know one of the common topics that we're hearing a lot of parents talk about is the mental load of life, of their work, household duties, and then we're already at max capacity, and then we now have to deal with our child's pump change or site change, or we have to deal with this argument with our partner. So just recognizing how much you're carrying in all your other parts of life mm-hmm. really is like the first step in increasing that awareness of how am I parenting? Like, how are you managing and holding yourself as as an employee, or as a good friend, or as a partner, and your parent. You're all these different parts, and having that awareness of how much one is influencing the other. It's really hard. It's hard work, and to practice that empathy and grounding and slowing everything down. Mm-hmm. It's a process.
Hey guys, just jumping in to remind you that one of our sponsors, BetterHelp, is offering 10% off your first month of therapy when you use my link, betterhelp.com/juicebox. That's betterhelp.com/juicebox. BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service. It is 100% online, boasts over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists, and you can talk to them however you want: text, chat, phone, or on video. You can actually message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. BetterHelp.com/juicebox. Save 10% on your first month. So from a practical standpoint, I find that turning diabetes tasks into breathing let me say what I mean by that before that gets too convoluted. You don't think about breathing. It just happens. And there are things that are going to happen around diabetes all the time. I try to turn them into breathing. They're just things that happen. I don't have to be 100% engaged in them. And that's me 17 years into this. I'm on day one, you're going to be fairly focused on trying to figure out a bolus for something. But as time goes on and you become better at it, to try to put it into just kind of mix it into the background a little bit. It's just a thing that happens. I've said before, like you don't approach a door and think, I'm going to reach my hand up now, grab that knob and turn it. Your hand goes up, you open the door, and you're through the other side. There's a moment when you'll be able to get diabetes to that spot. That's very helpful, because I think what happens is, like, those pump changes come out, like, and now there's, I have one right in front of me. Like, now, like a vial of insulin's in front of you, right? And now it's this medical thing, and it's on the table, and it's next to this device, and then your brain starts going, oh my God, I can't believe that she's got to stick that on her leg, and this isn't fair. And before you know it, we spiral right away into how horrible all this is. I don't give these things that agency over me. I deal with them like they're breathing or opening a door, and then they're gone. And that's it. I don't keep them in my mind, and I don't dwell on them while I'm doing them. And I think that can be helpful to avoid that, because there is mental load. Like, right, there's a lot mm-hmm. going on. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if you just stop and think about it, if you're in a family of 4, you have a relationship with your spouse, your parents, mm-hmm. the people you work with. You don't think about it, but you walk outside to get the trash. You got this dance you do with your neighbor when you see them. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have a relationship with one child, another child. You might be responsible for the kitty litter. And then on top of all that, who's keeping this place safe and warm and dry, and who's buying shirts, and, I want to have sex, and, like, I'm hungry mm-hmm. and I'd love to play PlayStation by myself for an hour one more time, or mm-hmm. I'd like to go shopping and nobody bother me, or, what's the thing mm-hmm. you hear people all the time? Like, I haven't taken a shit by myself in 10 years. like that kind of thing. All that's happening at once. And then somebody comes in and puts this vial of insulin in front of you and goes, hey, don't forget that your youngest kid has diabetes. Like, think about that too. There's got to be a way where you don't think about all those things and focus on the interpersonal stuff. Because I think when the interpersonal stuff gets good, all of it gets good. That's my assumption, or better.
Two thoughts. I think there's the journey, right, of thinking about the diabetes. As you mentioned, you're 17 years in, and there might be a moment, in 5 years where something happens with Arden that might trigger, I'm not putting that out there, but sure. As like, there are moments like maybe there's, I've had it for 33 years. Maybe there's going to be a complication that arises that you were not anticipating and you'd worked really hard to prevent. That is going to be triggering, and you're going to experience grieving around this chronic illness.
Yeah.
I think there are moments where you can get into that routine where it does become mindless and just part of breathing. And then it's also okay to have moments where you're just like, what, damn, this really
Snuck
is
back
hard.
up on me. Yeah. And it can sneak back. Listen, I have a complication of getting old. I just have surgery on my foot. Right. And I was sitting there thinking like, oh God, like I'm so old, my toe stopped working. Like, what the hell? And that brings in thoughts about how much life you have left. And I'm 52. Like, and people are like, that's so young. Is it? Not if I'm dying when I'm 70, because that sounds like I'm almost done. And I just starting to figure things out, so any little thing can kind of push you. There's nothing wrong with feeling it, and there's nothing wrong with thinking about it. There's something wrong with holding on to it. That's just going to waste your time, I think.
Yes, I think there's a process, and I think holding both of the thoughts that, wow, diabetes is not going to get in the way of my child's development, or if it's, my own. And it's a really serious chronic illness that takes a lot of work. And so I think we're always constantly, as caregivers or people with diabetes, you're always holding that, right? And some days the scale is going to tip where you're like, I got this, and it's not going to stop me. And then some days the scale might tip the other way where you're like, this is really hard, and I wish I didn't have to deal with this right in this moment because I want to go run off and do this other thing.
It's difficult. Listen, there's no doubt it's difficult. It's always going to come up at the worst time. But I think that's, again, acceptance is just such a big part of it, because
yes,
I hear people say all the time, like, why do I always need to change my pump or my this or that at the worst time? And I always say, like, what would a better time have been? There's no good time for this to happen. This isn't a thing that you need. Like, again, diabetes, I've heard it. I've explained it as sometimes it feels like you have to remember to breathe. Like, it's almost like you have to sit there and tell yourself, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe. Because if you don't do that, your health slips away. And eventually, like I said, it gets to the point where you understand it enough where that kind of fades into the background. But when it, like you're saying, comes back and slaps you in the face, all of a sudden it's there again. I was about to go for a walk. I was about to go to bed. I mean, that's the worst. Yeah, you live your whole life, your whole day, and you're exhausted. And the only thing you want to do is go to sleep, and you lay down and you or your child's blood sugar starts to fall. You're like, or the other day, Erica, I swear to you, I walked through my downstairs, and I was trying to get into the kitchen to get a drink. And it felt like within 6 seconds, the UPS guy rang the doorbell. Arden's high blood sugar alarm went off. My dog started barking, and I dropped something. And it literally felt like it all happened at the same time. And I was like, what the hell? I was like, oh my God. But here's the difference. I treat life like an action movie that's trying to kill me. I just watch the thing zip by my head and I go, oh my God, that was amazing. And then I keep going because I don't have time to sit around and talk with that. I've done a lot of cool things in my life. I can't tell you what any of them are. I have friends who are like, do you remember the time that you went to a private airport at 2:00 in the morning and flew from Philadelphia to Albany, New York with Stuttering John from the Howard Stern Show in a private plane? And I go,
yes.
Oh my God, I do remember that. But I never would have thought to bring it up because I don't remember. And and to me, that's it. Like, I have memories, and They fill me up, but I don't live in the past. Like, I'm always moving forward. And I mean, it's been working for sharks for millions of years. I think people should try it once in a while. That's all. Swim forward, eat a fish, keep going, take a crap, eat another fish.
And sleep.
Yeah. Don't start thinking about the cod you ate last Thursday. It's upsetting. Keep going. You have a note here I don't want to ignore that you put in the notes. I know you wanted to talk about it last week, and we thought it fit in here too, but let's kind of bundle together cultural backgrounds and the differences that those can bring up.
Yes, I think, obviously we are two people.
We're white. We're white people, Erica. Go ahead.
We are white. We are white. And oftentimes I know it can be easier to speak from what feels like normal in your upbringing. We're trying really hard to expose, all the different styles. And I did think it's important to note that there might be different expectations and of how one parents based on your cultural or ethnic background. And I think it's important for us to just acknowledge that we're not trying to say, if that is your custom and that is your culture of how that the parent is the authority figure. And that's the way it goes in your culture, in your background, and that works for you, then I think that's healthy and appropriate. But I think what we are trying to do, though, is shed light on other ways that, just where can we improve? How can we grow while also being kind and gracious to ourselves?
Well, I don't disagree with you. And at the same time, I'll add that I've gotten to watch 2 generations of Indian families show up in America and raise a generation of children. And if you think you're going to bring culture to America and then integrate your children with all of us white people, and you think it's not going to be easy to hold on to. Like, I've watched people give up on some pretty hard-held ideas pretty quickly because you introduce that freedom. And I don't mean like American freedom. I mean just like,
right.
Like the way things work here. And you start giving people like, you can't do this because of that and this. And people go, I don't know. I'm looking around. That didn't happen to other people. And I'm not inclined to listen to you. And I have a phone. Did you know I could Google everything? Did you know? Like, we brought it up before, right? You can pick up your phone and you have access to more information than the president had in 1960 or something like that, or 1980 or something like that. So you can't, it's harder and harder to hoodwink people into doing what you want them to do, whether it's for religious reasons or cultural reasons or whatever, because once they can see it, then, they're only going to do it if they want to, or you're going to have to force them. And I mean, that's on you. If you want to do that, that's fine with me. I don't care, honestly. But I'm not telling anybody they're wrong. I'm just saying, if that's your goal, it's not as easy as you think. So good luck. We've been dealing with it since the 50s, since like fast cars and Coca-Cola. Like, that's about how long it's been happening here, right? So, in the 40s, people listened. And in the 50s, it started, like, they blame Elvis, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Can't be
being the disrespect. Yeah.
Are you telling me Pornhub is Elvis's fault?
Gosh.
It could be. I don't know. I'm not a genealogist, but maybe. But no, it's hard. Like, and I think that for everybody listening, forget your cultural background. Like, that's the situation you live in now. Like, you're raising children in a time when they can fact check you in 3 seconds. So it's not even worth lying to them, because they'll find out, or they'll go ask somebody else. And it's not just about like, what is kissing, or like, now it's everything. They literally know everything. Some of the stuff my daughter laughs at, I'm like, what the hell? Oh, why does she know about that? And it's just they're way ahead of us. And it's going to be, I want to stay alive long enough to see where it gets them. Because in the beginning, they look overloaded. Like, right? Isn't that's what we've been saying for like the last 5 or 6 years? Like, oh, kids are overloaded. They're getting more information than they need.
Yes.
But it's going to come out in the wash. And you're going to see people in their 30s and 40s and 50s, I think, that are well ahead of where you and I were in our 30s and 40s and 50s. And then their kids are not going to be anxiety ridden the way they were, because we're going to have another generation of this under our belt. Yeah.
Well, we'll have to replay this in the next 20 to 30 years and see and do some fact checking.
Yeah, I'm going to be absolutely dead by then. So good luck to all of you. If you're hearing this in a time capsule, if I was right, find my grave and come pour one out for me. And if I was wrong, just cut me a break. I was just making a podcast. Okay. So I really appreciate you doing this. We've talked before. Episode 3, we're going to record next. It's going to be about self-care, personal growth for parents. Episode 4, creating boundaries and expectations. Episode 5 is going to be avoiding unintended consequences. Then 6 will be co-parenting and united fronts. And I think then episode 7, recognizing patterns and breaking cycles. It's about as far as we've gotten to what we know for sure is going to be in this, but we have a couple other ideas. We appreciate you listening. So thank you. And Erica can help people in person in California and online in California, Oregon, Utah,
and Florida.
How did Florida get mixed in there? They're very far from each other. I'm holding up my hands like America.
They are. Well, I have some clients there from a long, long time ago or during the pandemic, and Florida opened up a really nice telehealth policy. And actually, I'm currently also active for the next few months in Vermont, and I will see if that goes past 2023.
What happens? It gets cold, the maple syrup freezes up, and they take it away. What's going on?
Their telehealth policy
it ends.
might be extended. So I'm there currently.
Do you think more states will do it? Or do you think that COVID got as many to do it as they're going to?
I think states are currently really reevaluating what their telehealth policy is with, COVID officially ending. And some of those policies were closed, but then people, I think, really appreciate them, and particularly states who don't have many therapists, as many numbers that they need. They need the actual numbers of therapists, psychotherapists, all that.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. EricaForsyth.com.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for listening to the parenting series with me and Erica. EricaForsyth.com. If you'd like to find her, she's obviously terrific and specializes in helping people with type 1 diabetes. I'd also like to thank the Contour NextGen blood glucose meter for sponsoring this episode of the Juicebox Podcast and for sponsoring the remastering of the Diabetes Pro Tip series. Don't forget what I said earlier in the show. Go check out that Pro Tip series for that special offer link. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. And if you miss me in the meantime, head over to the private Facebook group and say hello. I'm always there. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, BetterHelp. You can get 10% off your first month of therapy with my link, betterhelp.com/juicebox. That's betterhelp.com/juicebox. If you've been thinking about speaking with someone, this is a great way to do it on your terms. betterhelp.com/juicebox. When you support the Juicebox Podcast by clicking on the advertisers' links, you are helping to keep the show free and plentiful. I am certainly not asking you to buy something that you don't want, but if you're going to buy something or use a device from one of the advertisers, getting your purchases set up through my links is incredibly helpful. So if you have the desire or the need, please consider using Juicebox Podcast links to make your purchases.